All right, welcome everyone to Lead Generation World London. We're on our second day, which is awesome because we had a great day yesterday, and we've got a really great lineup of sessions today as well. You should note though that we do have sort of an hour break after our second session, and then we'll be going right into our third and final session of the day that you definitely do not want to miss, along with these other ones as well. But just take note that we'll have a little 1 hour break there in the middle. But right now we're going to go ahead and get started and kick it off with an excellent session from Nigel Borwell of LeadTech. Really excited to have him with us today to share his information. He's been in the lead generation business for 20 years, Nigel. So it's, it's hard to argue you don't have some really great experience to share with everyone today. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you and let you take it from here.
Great, thanks, Mike. I'll just share my screen.
Yeah. Perfect.
Are we all good there?
Yes.
Great stuff. So thanks again for that, Mike. Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Nigel Borwell, and thanks for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed the conference so far, and thank you, Mike, for inviting me and putting on such a fantastic event. I think this is a great platform for both buyers and sellers to share best practices, which can help improve the industry and drive it forward in the right way. I'm really happy to be a part of it. I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about me and my business. As I said, my name is Nigel Borwell. I'm the co-founder and joint CEO of the company called LeadTech. So my background is in media and advertising sales. I started my first company at the age of 29 with my business partner with £1 in the bank. Fast forward 20 years and having run several successful digital marketing companies, we've built one of the biggest lead generation businesses here in the UK. Personally, I'm really passionate about performance marketing and lead generation, and I believe if done well, it can be an integral part of any business's growth strategy. I believe providing great customer experience is an essential part of any lead generation strategy for both the buyer and the seller and the customer. This is something I will refer to as the win-win-win throughout this presentation. So a little bit about LeadTech. We're a UK-based lead generation business, and we work with some of the largest brands in the financial services sector. We're a tech company that utilizes data and the latest AI, together with an in-depth knowledge of the customer that helps us develop long-lasting partnerships that yields great results and better experiences for everyone. At LeadTech, we see our business as an extension to our partners' business. This approach has helped us over the years develop and build our business off the back of some very successful long-term partnerships that still exist today. So by way of setting the scene, over the years, I've learned there's real value that comes from building true partnerships. And true partnerships are based on trust and transparency and total alignment of goals and expectations. So today I'm going to talk about the challenges faced by the buyer, the seller, and the customer, the keys to building a successful partnership, what we mean by a true partnership, and the benefits of a true partnership. So I hope you enjoy this presentation and find it useful for your business. Before we begin, just some housekeeping and clarification around language. Some of this is self-explanatory, but when I talk about lead sellers, I mean lead generators, and when I talk about lead buyers, I'm referring to the companies buying the leads, of course. So when I'm talking about the customer, I mean the lead, or more to the point, the person that visits your website and submits their information. Oh, and finally, when I use the word partner, this is from LeadTech's perspective. I'm referring to the lead buyer here. At LeadTech, we use the word partner because that supports our intention, and that's to build great long-term partnerships. Okay. So let's get stuck into it. So identifying the challenge. So lead generation isn't easy. There are plenty of challenges on both sides of the fence. I think an important aspect of a true partnership is having an understanding of some of these challenges from all sides. So let's have a look at some of the main challenges that come up for the buyer, the seller, and the customer. First, let's have a look at the lead buyer. Quality of leads is a big challenge for lead buyers. This must be one of the most talked about aspects of lead generation. I think I hear somebody talking about it almost every day. So how many lead buyers are consistently happy with the quality of their leads? I would say very few. Everyone wants better quality. The reality here is that leads are not perfect. Not everybody that is sent over to you as a lead is in that headspace to buy your product or service there and then. It's just not realistic to expect. I think it's the tactics and the processes that are in place between the buyer and the seller to provide a great customer experience throughout their journey that really helps convert more leads into customers and provide the buyer with a stronger ROI. So inconsistency in lead volume is another challenge. Most businesses looking to grow don't just need leads, they need a consistent supply of leads. I think it's important for lead sellers to put more emphasis on this aspect. It's something we've really focused on here at LeadTech over the years, and it's really helped us build some great partnerships. So inconsistent performance is a real challenge as well. And it's usually a consequence of not having the right processes in place to handle the leads in the right way. I've seen this so many times, and it's an ongoing challenge for both the buyer and the seller. Ultimately, if the buyer can't make the leads work consistently, there isn't a long-term partnership. So engaging with and nurturing leads to maximize sales isn't easy. It takes lots of experience and having the right approach. A good lead provider should work with you to implement a strategy that best fits your business. Another challenge for buyers is not getting the return on investment that they want or expect. This is usually a combination of the above points, but in my experience, this also can be compounded by unrealistic expectations. This is something that we work hard on at LeadTech. It's really important, and I'll cover this in more detail later. Finding a good lead provider can be difficult, and it's an expensive exercise if you get it wrong. So there are some great lead generation companies out there, but unfortunately, there are also some really poor ones, and it's really frustrating for the good ones because it's these companies that appear to be in it for a quick buck that potentially just give this industry a bad name. My advice to any buyers would be, do proper due diligence, get them to talk to you about their processes in detail. Don't be afraid to challenge what you're told, and make sure you ask for evidence where possible. Just don't take their word for it. For those who watched my Alan's session yesterday on Desmere at Contact State, you'll understand the importance of compliance and knowing that is at the forefront when working with you. So let's have a look at some of the main challenges for the seller. One of the biggest challenges for lead sellers is perception and understanding of lead generation. The processes for generating leads can be totally different to the process that the buyer uses to generate leads. And these leads can perform very differently to their own. At LeadTech, we spend a lot of time working with new partners to ensure that they understand how lead generation works and make sure that we're all totally aligned. Managing expectations is an important part of the framework that we have created at LeadTech to help us build true partnerships. I want to talk more about this framework later. In the last slide, we talked about lead quality from a buyer's perspective. A buyer's perception of lead quality is a very big ongoing challenge for lead sellers. In my experience, when I've worked with buyers that aren't great at converting leads into customers, they usually blame lead quality and or the seller. And this tends to be where some of this perception of poor quality leads comes from. Does this sound familiar? Managing lead expectations is critical in this process. I think the best way of overcoming this is to set clear expectations from the start and have total transparency of the process on both sides. Don't be afraid of having open, honest conversations, and make sure you challenge any unrealistic expectations that the lead buyer may have around performance. In my experience, not dealing with potentially uncomfortable conversations can lead to misalignment and be very damaging down the line. So it's really important to use data where possible to back up what you were saying. I feel it's easier for people to trust data, especially in a new relationship. So I will talk about creating trust and sharing data later in this session. It's important to recognise how much of a challenge fluctuating costs is to the lead seller. So lead costs are always fluctuating, and it's a constant battle to generate leads that buyers can convert at a level that meets their expectation, but do that in a way that's profitable for the lead seller. Seasonality and what's happening out there in the marketplace is always impacting on the cost of the leads. It can be a very fine line between making a profit or not. I think this is the point that we should really start to feel sorry for the lead generation companies. Seriously, I can think of a number of times where we're generating leads for our partners knowing that it's going to cost our business money. We've agreed a quota, for example, with our partner, and we really need to deliver that quota by month end. Otherwise, it will have a significant impact on our partner's business. So sometimes you just have to do what's right for the lead buyer and take that longer term view. And I think this is a great example of a true partnership and what it's all about. Plus, I always usually find that these things average out over time. So finally, I'd like to talk about some customer challenges. Why? Because the customer is often overlooked in this process. Ironically, and in my opinion, it's the customer that should be at the heart of this process. After all, the primary objective of the seller is to provide the buyer with lots of happy customers that will look to buy their products and services. So let's discuss some challenges faced by the customer. In my experience, trust is one of the biggest challenges for customers, particularly in our field, financial services, where what we're talking about is people's life savings. I think this is a great example of an area where building trust is an essential part of the lead generation process, but I'm sure that's the case in other markets too. In financial services, it's widely reported by the media. I mean, you just have to listen to Martin Lewis. It seems he's built his career based on being the face, the voice, and the champion of the customer. We also know that the customer confidence and trust is really high up on the FCA's agenda, and so it should be. It seems that everybody's tuned into this, and why wouldn't there be? So at LeadTech, we have lots of interactions with the customer on a day-to-day basis, and this is what they're telling us time and time again. So if we are aware that trust is such an important issue, then how can the lead seller and the lead buyer work together to build that customer trust? We'll get more into this in the next section. Another challenge we've identified is that customers want to be treated as real people and not as a lead or a piece of data. I wonder how many lead sellers out there see the customer as a real person. To be honest, I think it's a challenge for all of us in the lead generation industry. We have thousands of pieces of data going through our business every day, and it's all about analysis and optimization to get the best results. Sometimes it's hard to take a step back and view a lead as a real person, but ultimately they are real people. And when they come to our website, generally it's because they have a need. These people are someone's dad, their granddad, their mum, their auntie, and so on. Seeing them as people and not just pieces of data, I think, presents an opportunity. As I said earlier, I think customer experience should be at the heart of any good lead generation strategy. The general approach to lead generation out there in the market doesn't always provide the customer with a great experience. If we're honest, it's quite easy to spot the typical lead generation website out there, isn't it? The goal of the sellers is to entice the customer into their website and get them to enter their details as quickly as possible, because the commercial pressures is to generate that lead within a set target. Whilst I totally understand what drives this approach for many of us in the industry, it can be counterintuitive in lots of ways, as it often ends in the customer having a poor experience. And if that happens, then they're unlikely to convert into business anyway. This is something that always confuses me about this type of tactic, which is adopted by some lead generators. Having said that, it's really refreshing to see a movement away from these purist lead generation websites, with more and more of the focus on building brands that provide a much better experience for the customer and the buyer, and it's great to see. So remember that win-win-win. If the customer is happy, everybody is happy. At LeadTech, we're always looking at better ways to engage the customer and to give them what they need. It's the focus on customer experience and ensuring it exists between the seller and the buyer that can really make a difference and help grow both businesses in a more sustainable way. So looking at some keys to success, we've already touched on some of these whilst discussing challenges that we're all facing in the last section. Put a clear framework in place for the lead buyer to follow. Having a framework in place is something that's really helped us at LeadTech over the years, develop and retain true partnerships and understand our partners' businesses better. Over the years, and whilst there are some exceptions, or these are exceptions, should I say, we've found that many businesses are not great at working leads. There are many reasons for this. For example, it may be down to lack of process, resource, potentially poor processes, or just lack of experience. This is really common in my experience, and at LeadTech, it's usually identified before we start working with a new partner. The risk is that if these challenges are not identified, then the partnership could be doomed to fail before it's even had that chance to begin. At LeadTech, we've developed a framework, as I said, that clearly sets out a step-by-step approach to building a true partnership. It starts with an initial pilot to test and learn, and this helps set some benchmarks which can be used to set realistic goals and targets for both the lead buyer and the lead seller moving forwards. There is very much a long-term approach to this with clear short and medium-term milestones and criteria for success. So this allows us to build that trust in the background. It's important to break it down into key phases and to set clear targets and expectations at each stage. I briefly talked about setting expectations earlier. It's absolutely essential to have open and honest conversations about what the seller should expect at each stage. And don't be afraid to challenge their expectations around performance too. If these are misaligned, it can be really damaging to the relationship and affect trust down the line. Building trust in a new relationship can be a really big challenge for anybody. For me, it all starts with that transparency and having open and honest conversations. So think about what that framework might look like for your business. So let's get stuck into some specific examples of things that the buyer and the seller can do to build that trust and increase the chances of building a great partnership. Right from the outset, tell the buyer how you work and be upfront about how you want them to work, so you can both achieve maximum success. As I said, it's about being honest and transparent right from the very start. I think it was Ernest Hemingway that once said, the best way to trust somebody is to trust them. I totally agree with this. I think it's much easier to trust someone if they're displaying the right behaviours and you feel that you're on the same page. So make it as easy as possible for them to trust you right from the start by taking the initiative and just being transparent. Give them confidence by showing them that, show them what you're doing and the work that you're doing and the results that you're achieving for the lead buyers. Sharing data can really help establish trust. I find that case studies, if done really well, can be a powerful way of proving credentials and giving that confidence. Show the buyer the customer journey. This gives the buyer the confidence that when the customer gets to them, they've had a good experience and they've been exposed to the right messages and they're hopefully ready for a conversation. As I said earlier, it's essential to set expectations. The best way of doing this is by having those clear targets that are agreed upon by both the buyer and the seller from day one. These targets can change over time. It's better to start with targets that are easily achievable and allow for fluctuations in performance on both sides, especially in that early test and learn phase we talked about. Alignment of strategy is an important part of building this long-term trusted partnership. However, in the early stages, it can be really challenging. Sharing sensitive information on one another's businesses isn't easy. are not always realistic to expect, not from day one anyhow. So trust generally has to be earned. This is the value of the framework I talked about. Building trust will happen over time by being transparent right from the start and giving the buyer confidence as results are achieved along the way. So what do we mean by a true partnership? The word partnership is bandied around really easily these days. Most relationships are very transactional, and as soon as things start to get challenging, the relationship starts to break down because there isn't that deeper understanding and appreciation for one another's businesses. This is a two-way street, a two-way process of building trust on both sides. It's the responsibility of both the seller and the buyer to work together to build that trust, the trust that's required to sustain this long-term partnership. As I said previously, having a framework to set out expectations on both sides is a good starting point. An in-depth understanding of one another's businesses, their goals and ambitions for the future will really help align both businesses. Having the ability to adapt is a really good idea too. Things rarely play out as you expect them to, so it's important to be able to easily change and pivot if required. So make sure that your framework isn't too rigid and allows that to happen. So if I could give some advice to lead buyers out there, share performance data with the seller, ideally using a real-time CRM API. This can be really critical in helping to identify performance issues that can help the seller pinpoint the problem, which could be at the buyer side or the seller side. And without data, it would be almost impossible to diagnose. So I just wanted to quickly at this point give an example. It was only recently that one of our partners had a drop in performance. It can happen, as we all know, and we instantly jumped on it and to understand why and rectify the situation. So we kind of worked through all the data through a process of elimination. And what we'd worked out that something very small had changed at the buyer side in their sales process, but it had a really big impact on their performance. So once we changed this back, their performance quickly came back to normal levels. And I think this is a great example of the power of having that close working relationship and access to that data to find solutions. So let's talk about some of the benefits of a true partnership. The customer wins. If the customer has a great experience, then the buyer wins. If the buyer wins, the seller wins. It's very much that win-win-win. Promotes trust and transparency. This is an essential part of a long-term relationship and true partnership. Predictable performance through true partnerships. This is a really good one. So by sharing that data and refining processes on both sides, and through that understanding of one another's businesses, performance can become predictable. And if things do start to slip, which they do at times, issues can be identified and fixed quickly, as my example previously. So sustainable growth, business goals and objectives are met. Achieving shared business goals and targets that help both businesses grow in a sustainable way. This is what it's all about. So, in summary, build trust by being transparent. Set out that framework to help you do that. Take time to understand each other's businesses. This understanding is essential to building that trust and that alignment we talked about to support that long-term relationship. Make sure you set clear, short, medium, and long-term goals. It's important to have milestones and agree what success looks like at each stage. Put the customer first, give them a great experience and achieve that win-win-win together. And a quick tip, try to find partners that share the same values and they're aligned to the way that you work. So that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed it and got some useful takeaways to help your business build stronger partnerships. And thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, Nigel. That was great. We do have a couple questions before we wrap up here that we wanted to sort of touch base. The first one was around, getting how do you guys sometimes get a lead buyer to share their results? Sometimes they're hesitant about sharing data. with their partners. How do you sort of overcome that challenge?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I think it's everybody's challenge, isn't it? Certainly in that early part of the relationship, as we talked about, where trust necessarily isn't there, and that's normal. I think it's sharing experiences and results, and sharing data, and being as transparent and as open at that stage as possible. And hopefully, if you're speaking to a like-minded business with similar values, then I've found that we can often overcome that objection and move on.
Yep. The last question was some clarity around what you mentioned around lead sellers should, focus on creating a brand instead of just a funnel. Can you sort of elaborate on what you're thinking about there?
Absolutely. I think there are lots of examples of lead generation sites, and we can all spot them really quickly. As I said, they're designed to get people from through that journey as quickly as possible. I think there's an emergence of really cool brands now, where people are really starting to engage with the audience and understand the customer in ways we haven't done in the past. And I think that's where the opportunity is, because if we can put really valuable, engaging content in front of customers and know who those customers are and what they're looking for, then I think that's a great way of engaging them and creating better, customers and leads with higher intent for the buyers. And I think that's where this win-win-win will come in, which
Yeah.
I'm talking about.
Well, I think there's no question that, in an industry that needs more trust and transparency, the roadmap that you provided here would certainly, if everybody followed, would certainly make a big difference in the industry. So I appreciate you sharing it with us. If anybody else has any questions, or maybe we didn't get to, Nigel's email is up on screen, and you can reach him at any point in time. But Nigel, thank you again for the presentation. And folks, we'll see you in 30 minutes for the next session. Thank you.
Cheers.